Supernatural stories to send shivers down your spine. Remember to comment, like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified. Fate for those without remorse. I remember slipping in and out of consciousness momentarily. For a minute, I forgot why I was there or what was happening. I felt a raw, intense pain, as though someone were using my nerves as strings on an instrument. My lower half felt like I was going numb, and I was slipping out of consciousness again. I looked down to see her pale, white face feeding on my intestines. She stopped for a moment to look back at me, and I trembled as I began to remember. It started that evening as I was wrapping up my chores and getting ready to relax before bed. I sat down in front of the TV and began flipping through channels before remembering to clean up the kitchen, before sealing the leftover meat into a concealed container and placing it in the freezer. It goes bad so quickly. I paused for a moment to listen. After a few brief seconds, I decided to scan around my kitchen. I was alone tonight, but something unnerved me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was right beside me always. I attempted to shrug it off and get back to cleaning. I took extra special care to wipe down the meat tenderizer and bread knife. It seemed silly to use a bread knife on a roast, but its serrated teeth really helped cut through those tough cuts of meat. I finished cleaning up and went back to my programs. After a while, I felt myself starting to nod off. I checked the time. It was 10:30 to the minute. I decided to call it a night as I reached for the remote. As the television went black, I saw a white reflection beside me. My heart raced as the room went dark. I was too afraid to turn, but I could still see it in the reflection. I took a second to compose myself. I turned my head, only to find an open space next to me. I turned back to the reflection, thinking it was just a trick of light, but it was gone. I had a lot of trouble getting to sleep that night. I couldn't shake the sound of bare feet walking past my door. Eventually, I decided to get up for a glass of milk. Walking past the laundry room, I decided to check on my clothes. It was a bit last minute, but they needed washing and I couldn't wait until next week. Damn, I said, as I realised the stains were still there. Sometimes they're just too thick to wash out. There again, I felt that presence. I could hear the footsteps behind me approaching too. I tossed my top back in the washer and closed the door in hopes it didn't spot the light. The footsteps crept closer as my heart raced. All I could do was listen as the nightmare grew closer, hoping it would pass me by. As the footsteps rounded past the laundry room, I felt a sense of ease for a moment. A sigh of relief fell over me. As I turned around, I was stopped in my tracks. There it was, stood in front of me, its gaunt figure, grotesque and bloated, its pale face, lifeless and frail, the long, thin clumps of hair protruding from its scalp. That's all I can remember of how I got into this mess. I feel as though I'm paralysed and unable to fight back, as if there's nothing left to fight for. I began slipping in and out of consciousness again. I woke up the next morning on my laundry room floor. I immediately panicked, reaching for my stomach only to find it was untouched. I am not stupid enough to think this was all a dream, but maybe it was an omen. I raced out to the back to find everything in place. The grass was untouched and the soil was tacked in. I waited until nightfall. Sure, it'd come back for me, but it was my only opportunity. I waited patiently by the back door. I felt its presence moving behind me. As the neighbour's porch light finally dimmed, I made my move with a shovel in hand. I had to know if this was a spectre that was haunting me or something else entirely. I began digging into the thick, hard soil. Clump after clump of dirt. I could feel its presence growing more hostile. Eventually, I hit the thick plastic bag underneath. Hoping to find the decomposing body, to my horror, The bag was empty. I had my answer. I turned to find it perched on all fours, its limbs contorted out of shape. I closed my eyes and sighed one last time. I have this vivid memory as a kid, and nobody believes me when I tell them about it. So, growing up, I was in and out of foster care until I was adopted at around 5 years old. My first permanent week with my new family was very stressful. I remember feeling very stressed and anxious, and I couldn't sleep. When I did, I would have a recurring nightmare. One night, I had the recurring nightmare and woke up crying. I sat up in my bed and stared into the hallway, and I saw people walking up and down them. This one lady had the lower body of a human but the upper body of a shark. She came into my room and sat on my bed. She looked me in the eyes and told me everything would be okay and just to go to sleep. After that, every night when I cried myself to sleep or I'd wake up from the nightmare, she was there in my room, watching me, telling me everything is going to be okay. When I asked my mum about the shark lady, she told me it was just a dream, but I remember her sitting on my bed telling me it was going to be okay. I remember that was the only time as a child I felt safe in the house. I vividly remember the people walking up and down the hallways. One tall, lanky man and one old lady with curly hair would always stand in my doorway waiting for the shark lady to leave my room. I even remember what they were wearing. To this day, I can still hear her voice. Part of me wants to believe I made her up to help me cope with the abuse I was facing. But something in my gut tells me that's not true and she is 100% real. Haunted school. As a kid, I went to a school that was renowned for being haunted. It was built in the 1910s, but somewhere in the mid-1950s there was a devastating fire that burned the whole top floor and many children died that day. They rebuilt the building without the top floor, making it a 2-story building with a really creepy basement. I've got a few stories to share about this school. 1. There was an eerie feeling about the school. If I was walking around alone, I felt like I was always being watched. The wall of stone staircase was filled with paintings of children that former students had painted. These paintings took up 3 floors of staircases. Every time my friends and I passed these paintings, we would find something different. A soccer ball that was never there, a girl with a flower that was never there, etc. One day, we decided to take note of specific things to see if they were the same the next day. This was the time before phones, so no pictures. One note that we took was that one girl in the painting was smiling and looking towards the right at her friends with a flower. The next day, the girl was looking straight, directly at us, with no smile. We then avoided the staircase at all costs. 2. The school had a boiler room that you could peek into from the outside, but we weren't allowed inside. Sometimes, at breaks, when we were playing around that area, we would see white apparitions dart around inside. When we would look through the window, nothing would be there. Being kids, we were a bit curious though. So one day, we were having an event after school and decided to go up to the boiler room door and try to open it. Bravely, since our parents were in the gymnasium next to it. We turned the knob. It was locked. So we knocked on it, 3 times to be exact. Immediately, we got 3 knocks back from the other side and the doorknob started rattling like it was going to open. We all ran from the gymnasium and never looked back. 3. This story is also about the boiler room, And it may sound absolutely crazy, but I swear it's true, and one of the craziest things that happened to me. Once, when I peeked in from outside, I saw a huge pipe in the middle of the wall extending into an abyss. At the edge of the pipe was a girl's body just laying there, presumably dead. I told my friends to look, but by the time they peeked in, it was gone. For about a month from that day, I kept having nightmares of a girl in black hair, pale skin, begging me to help her. It was always the same dream, and when I asked her what she needed help with or from, the dream would end before she could tell me. Creepy. 4. This is a story I heard from the janitors who spend the night at the school. They were in the janitor's office, in the basement, one night, just chatting and having some snacks, when they heard kids laughing. It gradually got louder and they started hearing multiple kids laughing, balls bouncing, playing, running around, etc. They went into the gymnasium where the sounds were coming from and they immediately stopped. They found one singular ball in the middle of the gym and it rolled over to them. Anyway, they eventually shut down the school, broke it down, and built houses on the lot. Who knows what still happens on that ground? This is not a test. I was very confused but decided to read the rest of the alert. The alert said, "This is not a test. Do not open anything and hide in the most shadowed and isolated room in your house. An experiment broke out of their cage and is killing everyone in the vicinity." The lab was located in Michigan, and the experiment has made it to the following states: Arizona, Texas, Alabama, and Colorado. Stay inside at all costs. Well, even though I didn't live in any of those states, I was still scared. Luckily, I had a basement. Since I live in Florida, and earthquakes and hurricanes happen a lot down here. I mean, it's Florida. What do you expect? I gathered everything I could in one trip and locked myself in the basement. A few weeks passed and another alert had gone off, but my phone had died. The basement did have an alarm system though, so I just listened. This is not a test. The experiment has made it to 37 more states. Do not leave under any circumstance. The experiment was also found to have mutated and become stronger. Jeez, is this thing really that strong, I thought? Confused. Well, I had run out of food, and I guessed just a few minutes out of the basement wouldn't kill me, right? So I go outside, and my house is a literal train wreck. Like, what the fuck? The creature must be in my location, and I just decided to risk it all. After all, I'll be quick, just a few minutes. I go out of the house, kind of regretting my choice instantly as the neighborhood looked like 200 9/11s just happened. I figured that I was the only human left alive and that everything was locked. I saw the creature while on my way to the store and quickly ran as fast as possible. The store, to no surprise, was locked too. I tried to break the glass of the doors, but there was no luck for me. I tried to run as fast as I could, but just as I got to my house, the experiment grabbed me, pierced into my skin, and the venom seeped into me and was so painful it was like being stabbed 1,000 times. But I finally broke away and made it inside, gasping for air. I saw a gun next to my stuff, grabbed it, pointed towards my head, and right before I pulled the trigger, no more. A warning about an accident. This happened last year and has stuck with me ever since. For context, I live with my daughter, who's 11. My husband, her father, died earlier in the year. So, while I was sleeping, I had this dream that I was driving on a freeway with my daughter, and I was on the way to go to her school when a kind of small truck crashed into us and flipped our whole car over to the point the car was upside down. Then the dream skipped forward to my daughter and I being taken away by an ambulance to the hospital. Then the dream did another skip where my daughter was sitting in a hospital room crying and whispering that she wished I would wake up. I woke up from that dream very confused because it felt so real. But I thought nothing of it because I've never had such dreams before. So I was on my way to go to the bathroom, and when I was about to enter the bathroom, I turned my head towards my daughter's bedroom to see if she was awake or not. When I looked into that direction, I saw her father standing in the doorframe of her bedroom, shaking his head, and he was only there for like 2 seconds before I turned my head away, looked back, and he wasn't there anymore. So then I went into her room and woke her up for school. We then got ready like any other morning. We were about to leave, and I went to go and start the car, and I told my daughter to go get the keys to open the gate. I was struggling to get the car started. It didn't want to start at all, so I was thinking of asking the neighbours to help me out. When I was about to go and ask the neighbours to help me though, I got this piercing headache at the front of my head. It was so painful that I had to sit down right where I was standing, and in that moment I realised I should just stay home that day. I told my daughter the car won't start, so we should just stay at home and I'll get the car checked out later in the day. I don't know if my dream would have become a reality, but I'm glad I decided not to take her to school that day. My childhood home left me with many horrifying memories that I'll never forget. I recently stumbled upon this page and got sucked in by all the different experiences, so I thought I'd share mine. This happened years ago, but I remember everything clearly, and every time I think or talk about it, the feelings come back. When I was 8, my mum and stepdad moved us out to a country home. I have 2 younger siblings as well, so there were 5 of us who lived there. This house was always a little creepy, but it held so much more than just a creepy feeling. I've been able to see things from a very young age. I don't talk much about it because honestly, you always get mixed feelings, so I avoid it. Anyway, when we first moved in, I kept seeing a little boy. He was always in my little brother's room or the kitchen, and he cried all the time. I was 8, so I didn't really know why, but I always tried to ask what's wrong, and he didn't talk back. I kept telling my mum that a little boy in the kitchen kept waking me up at night, but she never believed me. For a few years, it was just the little boy, but that all changed very, very quickly. Right before my mum and stepdad divorced, they fought all the time. The environment in the house definitely felt hostile, and then he moved out and things went downhill fast. At first it was just a few extras I'd see at night, usually roam in our L-shaped hallway. Then weird things started to happen. I've never been a great sleeper, so I'd always be awake at night. I'd watch my door open and close by itself. I'd hear banging all through the hallway, and when I had to go do laundry in the back room that also housed the entrance to the basement, I'd instantly get a heavy feeling. One time when I went down there, I got to the second step up from the bottom and took a look around. I saw people chained to the wall staring at me. I literally ran so fast. I cried and tried to tell my mum, but she told me I was lying. I wasn't. However, she started believing me after she had her scary encounter, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share that here. But if I can, I'd be more than happy to post. Anyway, things kept progressing. We couldn't keep a light bulb in the dining room because as soon as we change it, the light would literally explode, leaving shards of glass all over the floor. I watched a kitchen chair fly across the room, slamming so hard against the wall it left a hole. We had a lamp in the living room that fell over every single night at the same time. Towards the end of our time there, we slept in the living room with the fireplace on because Mum couldn't afford propane. We had a blanket over the doorway, and when it was open because someone went to the bathroom, I'd see a lady in white pacing the dining room floor. She said one sentence and I'll never forget it. "He's coming." She'd repeat it until she disappeared. My theory is that she was giving us a warning about the demon that paid us a visit every night. He was evil. He was definitely set on making us leave or hurting us. He made his presence well known. Tormenting us was his favourite thing to do. We always went down the long hallways in pairs after things started getting really bad. The one time I didn't take someone, I ended up with scratch marks. Nothing followed us when we moved though, which is amazing, but I'm very thankful for it. Only one person has lived in that house since we left years ago. He lasted 6 months before he called it quits. It stands empty now at the end of a long driveway. I've been back once, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. The house is starting to cave in. I'm sure the farmer will tear it down and connect all his fields finally. I do have one piece of information that I'd love to share about it. When I'd done some research, I found out that the ground the house stood on was once at the point of an Indian burial ground. Later, the point, or hill, became home to a courthouse for a little town, and they did in fact use the basement as a jail, and they did chain people to the walls. The town died out, and a family bought the ground, tearing down the courthouse and building a house over the basement. The house burned down, killing the family, which included a young boy, and the house that we lived in was constructed in the same spot. Supernatural stories to send shivers down your spine. Remember to comment, like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notified.